The wind hit me first, whipping salt spray across my face as I stepped out of the truck onto the gravel path. My hands itched already, fingers curling like they remembered the feel of brass fittings and the cool resistance of rusted gears. This lighthouse, perched on the edge of the world, was my job for the winter. Restore the old clockwork, make the light turn again. But after her, after the woman who'd left my world in shades of gray, I'd built walls out of this work. Metal didn't ask questions. It just needed fixing. I kept my head down, tools slung over my shoulder, until I glanced up at the archive window. There she was, the architect's daughter, her silhouette pale against the dim light inside. Her gaze lingered, too long, like she saw something I wasn't ready to show. The project was short, 2 months, then gone. But isolation like this, it forces you close, whether you want it or not. As I unpacked my first tools, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, heavy and unyielding. The lighthouse rose like a sentinel from the rocky cliff, its stone tower weathered gray by decades of Atlantic gales. The base was solid granite, but higher up, the iron clockwork groaned with rust, exposed where the outer casing had peeled away. Below, the ocean roared without pause, waves slamming the foundation in a rhythm that drowned out everything else. I'd come here for that sound, for the way it matched the thud in my chest when thoughts of her crept in. No people, no complications, just the work. My days started before dawn. I'd climb the spiral stairs, boots echoing on the metal treads, until I reached the lantern room. The Fresnel lens dominated the space, a massive prism of glass panels, fogged and scarred from years of neglect. I'd start there, polishing each facet with a soft cloth and solvent, watching the grime lift in slow strokes. The glass warmed under my hands, reflecting fragments of the gray sea outside. Precision was my anchor. One wrong angle, and the light wouldn't focus right. After the lens, I'd move to the mechanisms below, the gears that turn the whole thing, seized with corrosion. I'd oil them methodically, the drip of lubricant steady as a heartbeat, feeling the parts loosen under my touch. In those moments, the world narrowed to the click of metal on metal, the faint scent of brass polish cutting through the brine. But quite like that, it pulls memories up from the depths. Her laugh, sharp and unexpected, surfacing when I least expected. The way her fingers had traced my arm in the dark, promising more than she could give. I'd lost her to someone else, to a life that didn't include the rough edges of mine. The betrayal had muted everything, colors dulled, sounds flattened. Work filled the gaps. I'd push the thoughts down, focus on a stubborn bolt, tighten until my knuckles whitened. Labor didn't betray you. It just demanded. From the tower, I first saw her properly on the third day. Down in the keeper's quarters, through the salt-streaked window of what used to be the office, now her archive room. She was a pale figure, bent over a table, sorting stacks of yellowed logs, her movements deliberate, like she was handling something fragile. Long, dark hair fell across her face, and she tucked it back without looking up, fingers stained with ink. The architect's daughter, here to catalog the history before the place sold. Her father was gone, business in the city, or so the email said, but she stayed, alone in that room of dust and forgotten entries. It unsettled me, her presence. The job brief mentioned her, but not this. Not the way she moved through the space like she belonged to it, pulling out ledgers from shelves warped by damp. Why linger? The archives could wait. But there she was, a shadow in my periphery, disrupting the solitude I'd counted on. I'd catch myself pausing mid-wipe on the lens, ears straining for the faint rustle of pages below. The cold metal grounded me, its weight solid in my palms, but her outline lingered, pulling at the edges of my focus. I'd descend for breaks, avoiding the archive door. Lunch was simple, bread and cheese from my pack, eaten on the rocks outside, wind tugging at the crumbs. The ocean's roar filled the silence, but twice I thought I heard humming drifting from the open window. Soft, low, like a half-remembered tune. It stirred something unwelcome, a warmth in the chill air that made me grip my thermos tighter. By afternoon, the rhythm pulled me back up. Gears needed aligning, pins oiled. But as I worked, the lighthouse felt less empty. Her shadow crossed the stairs once, carrying a box of papers, not glancing my way. Still, it shifted something. The precision felt interrupted, like a gear slipping just once. Evening fog rolled in thick that first week, blanketing the cliff in white. Visibility dropped to nothing, the kind that turns the world inward. I finished late, descending to the quarters, stomach reminding me I'd skipped dinner. The kitchen was cramped, a single stove and table squeezed between storage and her archive door. Smoke curled from the chimney. She'd lit the fire. The scent of something warm, maybe soup, mixed with the ever-present salt. No choice now. The fog trapped us both. The next morning, I threw myself into the scaffold repairs. The wind howled through cracks in the tower's base, carrying spray that stung my cheeks. I hauled the ladder up, securing it against the stone with ropes that bit into my palms. Up close, the iron framework showed its age. Flaking paint, bolts loose from years of vibration. I worked methodically, scraping rust with a wire brush, the metallic screech blending with the gusts. Focus here meant safety. One slip and the whole structure could fail. Interaction? Not on my list. I'd nod if she passed, but that was it. The work demanded everything. Down below, her world stayed separate. I'd glimpse her through the archive window when I descended for tools. Dust motes danced in the thin beam of sunlight slicing across her table, catching on yellowed pages. She traced faded ink on keeper journals with careful fingers, like piecing together a puzzle no one else cared about. Names from a century ago, storm logs in spidery script. Her head bent low, hair curtaining her face. It was methodical, almost meditative, the kind of task that filled silence without demanding company. I respected that distance. Or told myself I did. We crossed paths that afternoon by the stove. I'd come in for coffee, grease streaking my arms, salt cresting my skin. She was there, rinsing a mug, the scent of old paper clinging to her sweater, dry, musty, like forgotten attics. It clashed with my own smells, the sharp tang of lubricant and sea brine. I kept my eyes on the pot, but she turned, wiping her hands on a cloth. "The lens," she said, voice even, like testing water. "How old do you think it is?" I poured the coffee, steam rising hot. Early 190s, French glass, probably shipped over in pieces. My words came short, clipped, no room for more. She nodded, leaning against the counter. Her eyes flicked to my hands, then away. My father designed additions to places like this. Said the light had to cut through more than fog. It had to reach the lost ones. I gripped the mug tighter. Lost ones. Like me, after her. The woman who'd promised forever, then vanished into someone else's arms. I'd fixed boats after that. Engines that didn't lie. "It just needs to work," I said, turning away. "History's your job." She didn't push, just watched me go. Quiet as the dust settling behind her. That exchange stuck, though. Up on the scaffold, wind tugging my jacket, I felt her gaze like an echo. From the tower's curve, I could see the archive window. She sat there hours, head down, but once or twice she'd look out. Not at the sea, at me. It felt like judgment, unspoken. Why this woman, rough and silent, tearing into her father's legacy? Or maybe it was pity, seeing the walls I carried. Either way, it pricked. I hammered a bracket harder, the clang ringing out. Metal didn't judge. It held. Days blurred like that. I'd climb down for water, hear the faint scratch of her pen through the wall, avoid the kitchen till late. But the humming came again one evening, low and steady, drifting from her door as I passed. It was an old tune, something from folk records my mother played. Simple melody, pulling at threads I thought buried. Warmth spread unbidden, a crack in the cold. I paused, hand on the doorframe. Why hum here, alone? It stirred memories of nights tangled with her, soft songs in the dark before it all broke. I shook it off, retreated to my cot. Unwelcome. All of it. The lighthouse enforced the space between us, but it narrowed, too. Meals stayed solo. Canned stew, heated quick, eaten at the table's edge. She'd emerge later, carrying a tray of tea, chamomile steam curling up. We'd nod, eyes on our own corners. Her presence filled the air, though, like the wind finding every gap. I'd catch her outline in the hall mirror, sorting files by lamplight, face intent. It made the quarters feel smaller, the silence heavier. I pushed back with work, repaired a hatch that rattled in gusts, sanded railings till they gleamed. The ocean's roar covered any stray thoughts, but her humming lingered in quiet moments, a hook I couldn't dislodge. It thawed something, against my will. A reminder that solitude had edges, sharp ones. Then the gale hit, sudden, mid-afternoon. Windows rattled like bones, wind shrieking through seams. I secured the scaffold fast, ropes whipping wild. Inside, the keeper's quarters groaned, drafts snaking under doors. She appeared in the hall, arms full of blankets, face pale but steady. No way out now. The storm pinned us, intensifying the trap. Waves pounded the foundation like fists, each crash sending tremors up the tower. I felt it in my boots, the stone shifting just enough to unsettle. The wind drove rain sideways, sheets of it lashing the windows until they bowed inward. Power flickered first, a dimming of the single bulb in the hall, then darkness swallowing the quarters whole. Isolation deepened fast. No radio signal out here, no road passable for days. The lighthouse stood alone, us with it, cut off from the mainland's hum. I moved quick, grabbing the toolkit from the kitchen. Hatches first, the ones at the base, iron flaps that kept sea spray from flooding the stores. She followed without a word, arms still clutching those blankets, her steps sure despite the shake in the walls. "Candles," she said, voice cutting through the howl, "and logs from the shed. I'll get them." Practical. No panic. I nodded, pulling on my slicker, and headed out into the gale. The door fought me, slamming back with force. Rain soaked me instant, cold biting through wool. I wrestled the hatches shut, bolts slick under my fingers, wind tearing at my hood. Salt stung my eyes. Back inside, dripping, I shook off the water. She was already at the hearth, stacking split oak from the woodbox, matches striking sparks in the gloom. We lit the fire together. Flames caught slow, wood hissing as it dried, then crackling steady. Shadows danced on the walls, long and jagged, playing over faded nautical charts pinned there. Old routes marked in pencil. Storms circled like warnings. The room warmed gradual, heat pushing back the damp chill. We sat on opposite sides of the hearth, blankets draped over shoulders. Silence settled heavy, broken only by the fire's pop and the storm's distant thunder. No need for words yet. The world outside raged, but here the glow held. She broke it first, after the flame steadied. Staring into the embers, she asked, "Do you believe in lighthouse ghosts?" Her tone was quiet, like testing the air. The logs mention them, keepers seeing lights in the fog, voices from the waves, things that aren't there. I poked the fire, sparks rising. Mechanics explain most. Faulty prisms, echoes off the cliffs. Ghosts are stories for long nights. But her question pulled at something. The archive she sifted held those tales. Shadows of men who'd manned this post alone, their losses etched in ink. Like my own. The woman who'd left, her absence a ghost in every quiet hour. She shifted, blanket wrestling. My father said the same, but he built them to chase ghosts away. Lights to guide the lost home. Her eyes met mine across the firelight, steady. What about personal ones? Losses that linger, like fog you can't shake. Deflection came natural. I stick to what I can fix. Gears jam, you oil them. Ghosts? They rest on their own. My voice stayed rough, focused on the practical. But her empathy slipped through, soft as the warmth from the hearth. She didn't press, just nodded, like she saw the cracks anyway. The way my hands clenched the poker, knuckles pale. Past her, the charts blurred, routes twisting like paths I'd wandered after the breakup. The trails echo, sharp in the isolation. We ate from cans that night. Beans heated over the flames, spoons scraping tin. Proximity crept in, unavoidable. The keeper's quarters had one main room for this, table shoved near the fire, chairs close. Reaching for the lantern fuel, kerosene in a tin jug on the shelf, our hands brushed. Mine rough, calloused from tools, hers finer, ink-flecked. The contact sparked, unintended, a jolt through the chill. I pulled back quick, pouring the fuel with steady hands, but the air thickened. Her gaze lingered on the motion, then away, to the shadows. The storm didn't ease. Wind rattled the chimney, waves booming closer. Power stayed out, candles guttering on the mantel. We banked the fire low, embers glowing red. No separate rooms held now. The cold drove us to the single space. Cots pushed near for shared heat. Conversations turned personal as night deepened, her voice low against the roar. Father's away too much. These archives, they're all I have of him here. I listened, the fire's crackle filling pauses, her words pulling at my guards. The storm held us longer than expected, days bleeding into one another until the quarters felt like a single breath held too tight. Cots pushed side by side near the hearth to chase the damp cold. My tools scattered across the floor amid her stacks of papers. Wrenches and oil rags tangled with yellowed ledgers, the sharp scent of metal polish mixing with the dry must of ink. Space shrank to the width of an arm's reach. I'd wake to the sound of waves still crashing, her form outlined in the dim light filtering through the salt-crusted window. No walls between us now. Just the fire's low glow and the wind's constant moan. Rhythm shifted with the confinement. Mornings started with joint meals, canned peaches or stew warmed over the embers, spoons clinking in shared bowls. We'd sit at the scarred table, knees almost brushing under it, the wind's howl filling the pauses like an uninvited guest. I'd portion out the food, practical as always, while she poured tea from a battered pot, chamomile steam curling up to soften the brine in the air. Conversation came in fragments at first. "Pass the salt," she'd say, her voice steady. I'd nod, handing it over, fingers careful not to touch. But the isolation wore at the edges. Meals stretched, the storm outside mirroring the one building in the quiet between us. She opened up one evening, as rain drummed the roof like fingers on a drum. Staring at a ledger spread before her, she traced a faded signature, her father's from years back. He built this place to last, said lighthouses were about endurance, cutting through the dark. Her words hung, waited. But he left the stories behind. These archives. They hold secrets he never shared. Letters from keepers about storms that took ships, families waiting on shore. And his own notes, sketches of gears he redesigned alone. She paused, fingers stilling on the page. The burden showed in the line of her shoulders, the way she carried his absence like an extra load. I'm here to catalog it all, but it's like piecing together a man I barely know. What if the secrets stay buried? I listened, poking at the fire. Embers shifting under the iron. Her vulnerability pulled at me, a thread loosening my own knots. Past betrayal flickered. The woman who'd sworn loyalty then slipped away to easier shores, leaving me adrift. Works like that, I said, voice rough, restrained. You fix what's broken, but some rust runs deep. Mine came from someone who promised solid, then cracked under pressure. It was brief, the words scraping out like old bolts. No details, just the ache. She didn't pry, just met my eyes across the table, her gaze holding without demand. The wind howled louder, filling the silence that followed. Tension built in those small spaces. Her eyes would linger on my hands as I mended a loose hinge on the table, calluses thick from years of wrenches, nails lined with grease that no scrub removed. Unspoken curiosity there, in the way her fingers hovered near mine when passing a tool, or how she'd watch me oil a gear from the doorway, head tilted like studying an old map. It stirred the air, thick as fog rolling in. I'd feel it in my chest, a pull against the walls I'd built. Metal was safe, cold and unyielding. But her presence warmed the edges, her chamomile scent cutting through the salt like a hidden current. One night, as thunder rumbled distant, we shared a storm tale over reheated beans. She started it, voice low against the gusts. Father told me about a gale here in '82. Waves so high they flooded the base, keepers clinging to the rails. One log says a man saw his wife's face in the foam, calling him home. I chuckled, dry and unexpected, the sound surprising us both. Sounds like the mechanics talking. Salt spray plays tricks, refracts light into shapes. She smiled then, faint but real, eyes crinkling at the corners. Or maybe the sea has stories too. Laughter came next, mine rough, hers soft, over the absurdity of ghosts and grease traps. It cut through the chill, a brief thaw in the room's heavy air. Warmth spread, unbidden, like sunlight piercing clouds. The calm broke on the fourth day, wind easing to a whisper, sky clearing to pale blue. But the storm's damage showed. Hatches warped, gears jammed from the shake. Repair urgency hit hard, pulling us both to the tower top. I led the way up the spiral stairs, her footsteps echoing behind, papers tucked under her arm for reference. The lens waited, fogged but intact, ocean stretching endless below. Together, we started the climb, the shared purpose tightening the thread between us. We reached the lantern room as the afternoon light slanted through the prism, casting fractured beams across the rusted gears. The air up here was thinner, laced with brine from the open gallery, the ocean's endless churn visible through salt-etched panes. I knelt by the clockwork base, pointing to the main drive shaft. See this alignment? The teeth mesh here, turning the whole assembly. One off and the light spins wild. My hands trace the grooves, oil slick on my fingers. The metal, cool and unyielding. She leaned in close, her ledger open to a keeper's diagram from decades back. The diaries match. One entry notes a storm jammed it just like this. Keeper spent nights realigning by feel, alone. Her voice carried that quiet certainty, connecting ink to iron. We worked side by side then, her reading passages aloud while I adjusted pins with a spanner. The clink of tools blended with her words, a rhythm building between us. She'd pause to hand me a rag, our knuckles brushing brief, the contact lingering like salt on skin. As the gears loosened under my touch, she shared more. I came here as a kid, summers with Father. He'd sketched the tower at dusk, me trailing behind, collecting shells from the rocks. Her eyes drifted to the horizon, voice softening. It was our world then, isolated, but safe. No city noise, just the waves and his plans unrolling on the table. She traced a faint scar on her palm, from some old slip with a compass point. But he left for bigger projects. Now it's just echoes in these pages. The isolation, it mirrors mine. Staying to sort what's left, wondering if I'll ever leave. I nodded, wiping sweat from my brow, the spanner heavy in my grip. Her words pulled at parallels I hadn't voiced. Up here, the tower felt like my own refuge, away from the mainland's pull, the life she'd shattered. But sharing the space with her, it cracked open. Work anchors me, too, I said, voice low against the wind's distant moan. After love collapsed, hers on someone safer, steadier, the world went gray. No color, no pull, just this. I gestured to the mechanisms, heart thudding uneven as I admitted it. Fixing what's broken keeps me steady. Without it, I'd drift. She met my gaze, steady, no judgment in her eyes. The lantern's faint glow caught her face then, freckles scattering across her nose like stars in dusk sky. I'd noticed them before, in passing light below, but here, close, they pulled me in. Heart thudded harder, a gear slipping in my chest. Chamomile lingered on her from the tea she'd brewed earlier, mingling with the sharp ocean brine, a warmth cutting through the cold metal tang. It unsettled me, this draw, her nearness stirring aches I'd buried under labor. We continued, her connecting a diary note to a warped bracket I filed smooth. This keeper wrote of lights guiding lovers lost at sea. Father would have laughed, said it was refraction, not fate. But her tone held something deeper, eyes flicking to mine. The project neared end, Gears turned freer now, lens gleaming under my polish. Departure loomed, a week maybe, back to mainland jobs. Yet her questions shifted, hinting at threads beyond the work. What pulls you to places like this? Not just the fixing. It wasn't casual, her voice probing gentle, like testing a hinge. I straightened, hands flexing on the rail, the brass warm from sun. The quiet. The focus. But truth edged in. Her presence complicated it, a light refracting through my gray. Freckles again in the shifting beam, and that scent wrapping close. Conflict rose, the end pressing like a storm front. Why stay longer? The alignments held now, but part of me delayed, savoring the shared rhythm. Evening settled as we finished the session. Tools packed slow. The room dimmed, lantern light pooling soft on her features. She set the ledger down, voice softening further. Those keepers, they stayed for reasons beyond duty. Inquiries turned intimate, her eyes holding mine, the air thick with unspoken pulls. The final storm hit harder than the last, a late winter beast that delayed everything. Winds clawed at the tower, rain sheeting the gallery until the world blurred to gray. Departure, once a week away, stretched indefinite. No ferry in this swell, no path clear. Nights filled with low conversations, then. Voices threading through the keeper's quarters like smoke from the hearth. We'd sit by the fire after dark, her ledger closed for once, my tools set aside. The ocean's roar muffled outside. But inside, words came easier, pulled by the isolation's weight. She admitted it one evening, as flames licked the iron grate. Staring into the embers, she wrapped her arms around her knees. These archives, they're his legacy, but what if it's empty? Father built lights to save others, but left me with shadows. No one to share the stories with, no pull to keep me hereafter. Her voice cracked slight, vulnerability raw in the firelight. She sought something in me, my hands steady on wrenches, my focus unbreaking. You stay with the work, make it turn again. How do you hold on when the rest slips? I shifted on the cot, the wool blanket rough under my palms. Her fear mirrored mine, the ache of legacies unfinished. But her nearness stirred deeper, a want blurring the lines I'd drawn. Dreams came that night, unbidden, her fingers tracing gears on my skin, breath warm against my neck. I woke sweating, heart thudding like a jammed piston, the quarters dim and close. Reality mixed with it, her form asleep across the space, hair spilling dark on the pillow. Old aches woke too, the ghost of touch from before, but twisted now, wanting her instead. I turned away, fists clenched in the sheets. This wasn't duty. It was pull, dangerous and real. Days pushed us closer in the work. Up on the scaffold the next morning, waves still crashing below, I tested the railings I'd mended. She climbed up behind, ledger in hand, to check alignments against old notes. The platform swayed slight in the gusts, metal creaking under our weight. Here, I said, pointing to a loose pin. As she leaned to see, the wind tugged her sweater, balance shifting. My hand shot out, steadying her waist, palm flat against the wool, firm through the chill. She froze, breath catching sharp in the confined space between us. Her eyes met mine, close enough to see the flecks of gold in the hazel, chamomile faint on her skin mixing with the salt spray. The contact held a beat too long, warmth seeping through fabric, my pulse echoing the ocean's boom. I pulled back slow, muttering about the wind, but the air hummed after, charged like before a strike. Turmoil churned inside as we descended. Why linger on that pin when the gears turned smooth? The project begged to finish, lens polished, clockwork oiled, but her presence hooked me, a gear I couldn't ignore. Up in the lantern room alone that afternoon, wiping the final prisms, I questioned it. Duty ended soon, trucks waited mainland side. Yet morning stretched, tools handled deliberate, savoring the echo of her footsteps on the stairs. Her shadow crossed the window below, sorting pages, and I'd pause, rag still. The pull tightened, want blurring work with need. Metal stayed cold, but she warmed the edges, freckles vivid in memory, her voice a low current under the waves.
Empathy bridged it that night, as thunder rolled distant.
She paced the quarters, doubt heavy in her steps. What if I leave it all buried? Father's work, gone, like him. I stood, crossing the space in 2 strides, hands on her shoulders, light, grounding. You hold the stories. That's strength, not empty. Words came sparse, weighted, like lead weights on a line. I've fixed broken things, but you keep the light in them. She leaned in slight, forehead to my collar, breath steadying against my chest. The scent of ink and chamomile wrapped close, her hair brushing my jaw. No more said, but the hold lingered. Comfort turning to something deeper. Aches stirring again.
Nights blurred after, conversations low by candlelight.
She'd read fragments from logs, keepers finding solace in storms, and I'd share rough tales of engines saved at sea, voices overlapping like waves. Dreams intensified, her touch ghosting in sleep, waking me to the real her across the room, fire embers low. The scaffold moment replayed, hand on waist, breath caught. Want built, reality fraying at duty's edges. Why stay? Her pull answered, unspoken.
Project completion loomed now, gears primed, lens ready.
But as we worked the final alignments, her voice hung in the air, direct and steady. Why are you still here?
We climbed the tower summit that final morning, the spiral stairs echoing our steps like the last turns of a winding gear. The lens gleamed now, restored under layers of polish, facets catching the weak winter sun, throwing prisms across the iron floor. Below, the sea stretched endless under a clearing sky, waves settling to a restless murmur, foam tracing white lines on the rocks. The air up here bit sharp, carrying the last tang of storm salt, but the wind had eased, leaving a vast quiet that pressed in. I'd finished the alignments yesterday, the clockwork humming smooth when tested. The project was done. Trucks waited on the mainland side, a ferry ride away. Yet here we were, her ledger tucked under arm, my spanner in hand for one last check. She stood by the gallery rail, gazing out, hair wetting light in the breeze.
I joined her, tools clinking as I set them down, the brass rail cool under my palms. The view pulled at us both, horizon blurring sea and sky, no land in sight. Isolation complete, but not empty. Her presence filled it, a steady weight beside me.
Why are you still here?
Her voice cut steady, eyes searching mine when she turned. No accusation, just that quiet probe, like reading faded ink on a page. The question hung, simple but loaded, echoing the delays I'd made. Extra oils on pins already loose, alignments rechecked twice. The work had begged end a week back, but I'd lingered, tools handled slow.
Words failed me.
My throat tightened, past fears clashing hard with the pull now. The woman before her, the one who'd cracked my world, her leaving a rust that no polish fixed. I'd come here to mend metal, not hearts, walls high against any draw. But this daughter, with her ink-stained fingers and chamomile warmth, had slipped through. Fears roared up. Another loss, another gray. Yet the present tugged stronger, her freckles sharp in the light, the way her breath synced with the waves. I opened my mouth, closed it. Silence stretched, wind filling the gap, my hands gripping the rail till knuckles ached. Inwardly, revelation built like pressure in a sealed gear. I'd admitted the delays to myself nights ago, alone on the cot, her humming drifting through the wall. Not for the lighthouse, for her. The unspoken truth coiled tight. Staying meant mornings with her shadow on the stairs, evenings by the fire trading fragments of lives. Duty ended, but this pull didn't. It hummed like the clockwork now, steady and real. Why explain? Words would break it, turn want to warning. She didn't look away, eyes holding mine unflinching, hazel depths pulling deeper. The sea churned below, but up here time slowed. My hand shifted on the rail, inches from hers. The brass warmed under sun, defying the wind's chill. Then, deliberate, her fingers brushed mine. Light, testing, skin soft against my calluses. I didn't pull back. Instead, I turned my palm, letting them meet, intertwine slow. Warmth spread, defying the cold gusts whipping our coats. Her touch grounded, like a pin slotting true, sending a tremor up my arm. Heart thudded uneven, fears receding against this realness, her pulse under my thumb, steady as the lenses gleam. The emotional peak crested in that silence. No grand declarations, just the hold conveying it all. The stay for her. The want unspoken, but seen. Her gaze softened then, understanding dawning like light refracting through prism. Eyes crinkling faint, a small nod in the tension's release. The world sharpened, colors bleeding back. Sea blue vivid, her hair dark against sky. Past ghosts faded, present anchoring us to the rail. We stood like that, hands linked, wind tugging but not breaking. The tower felt alive now, light ready to turn. Descent came gradual, stairs creaking under our steps, her hand slipping free but warmth lingering. Back in the quarters, the air shifted, charged with possibility, her glance across the table holding new weight, quiet humming resuming soft as we packed the last tools. Descent from the tower left the quarters changed, like the air had thickened with something alive. The stairs creaked under our boots, but her hand brushed mine on the rail once, deliberate now, no pulling away. Back below, the main room felt smaller, warmer, fire embers still glowing from morning, her papers stacked neat, but tools forgotten on the table. We'd crossed it, that line, without a word. Touches lingered after, her fingers grazing my arm as she reached for a mug, steady and unhurried, warmth seeping through wool. No retreat. The space hummed with it, possibility curling like smoke. My shift came gradual, but deep. The world sharpened around her, gray edges bleeding color, sea blues vivid through the window, her hair catching firelight in deep chestnut waves. She'd become the light refracting through the lens I'd polished, pulling everything into focus. Past aches dulled, not gone but distant, like echoes off the cliffs. Her presence anchored it, steady as the tower's base, chasing the mute haze I'd carried. I'd catch myself pausing mid-step, thermos in hand, watching her sort the last ledgers, ink spots on her fingers like constellations. Want settled. No longer turmoil, but a quiet pull, real as the ocean's rhythm below. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the walls in slanted gold, she set the ledger aside. We sat by the hearth, knees close under the table, chamomile steam rising between us. Her eyes met mine, steady. I knew the pull early, she said, voice low, like confessing to the flames. From that first glimpse in the window, you climbing the scaffold, hands sure on the ropes. It wasn't just the work. It was you, holding steady in the wind. She paused, fingers tracing the table's grain. The question, it tested us both. If you'd leave with the job done, or stay for this. Resolve flickered in her gaze, no doubt now, just the truth laid bare, like pages turned open. I nodded, throat tight, her words slotting into place like a final gear. The project wrapped that week, gears oiled, lens aligned, the light ready to turn under new keepers. Trucks came with the calm, hauling my tools across the ferry, but the bond held, threads woven through storms and silences. We'd packed together, her archives boxed, my wrenches wrapped, but glances lingered, promises unspoken in the brush of hands. Isolation ended, but it hadn't broken us. It forged something enduring, pulling us toward mainland lives intertwined. Lamplight softened the room as night fell, the single bulb casting pools on the floor. She stood to bank the fire, and I rose with her, space closing natural. Our hands met again, palms pressing, calluses to ink. I leaned in slow, her breath catching soft. The kiss came gentle, lips brushing hesitant at first, then deepening, a quiet crossing of boundaries, her mouth warm and yielding, tasting of tea and salt-kissed air. No rush, just the press of her against me, hands sliding to waist, holding like we'd hold through waves. It sealed it, intimate and true, aches blooming into something whole. Resolution settled as we parted, foreheads touching, breaths mingling. The project faded behind, but we endured. Her father's legacy cataloged, my fixes complete. Yet us, a new light guiding forward. Final image burned, hands intertwined on the gallery rail that last dawn. Ocean calm below, waves lapping gentle on the rocks, horizon wide and waiting. No more gray. We'd leave together, world expanded, colors vivid in the shared quiet. The door to our future swung open wide. No turning back now, just the steady pull ahead. If this quiet truth resonates, share your story below. Subscribe for more tales of finding light in the storm.